Good evening, night walkers. This is Untold Scary Truths, where silence isn't comfort, it's strategy. Tonight I'm your shadow on the ridge as we enter Ash Pines. A range that looks clean on the map and wrong in your lungs. A place where breath sings back if you stop, where pale lights draw circles like traps. And where familiar faces answer with the right badge number and the wrong delay keep your boots moving. Keep your eyes off the glow. And if something calls your name from the dark, remember that names are leashes. This is your last warning before the line ends and the counting begins. I met my six just before dusk. The air a brittle green and the gravel tasting faintly of metal. And I told them the rules I don't argue about anymore. Stay on the line where the tread is salted and ironed. Never stop on 8. Never answer a voice coming from a reflection. And if a ranger appears off schedule, you ask the badge. Then the rotation. Then you watch the pause between the two. Rafi smirked behind an expensive headlamp. Zara checked her camera like it could bless us. Hina counted kits twice the way medics do when they've seen blood behave like a rumor. Bilail folded maps that would not matter to the part of the forest that refuses paper. Amina watched the compass needle hesitate like a thought. And Faze the vlogger with a mic pinned too bright promised he wouldn't film faces. Only horizons, as if the horizon ever asked permission. Twilight in Ash Pines comes with a thinning of ordinary sounds. Crickets stepping back like ushers, the creek's sibilants turning from water to whisper. And then the first test, the moment we halted for laces and a strap. The air ahead released a soft timed exhale, 1, 2, 3. 4 that met our stillness like a handshake we hadn't offered. So I clapped once and said move. And they moved because the sound made something in the ribs want to kneel. And kneeling here is an invitation written in bone. The trail bent through firs with bark like nightcloth, and I ran my palm along the inside edge, where the ground darkened from iron filings. A scene the color of old rain, and Amina asked if it's real science or old tricks, and I said both. Because a boundary is a story you teach the land until it repeats it back. And for a while the repeating worked. Moth pale lanterns hummed over creek stones, making glyphs that wanted eyes, wanted attention, wanted to step offline. And I taught side-glancing see the glow with your cheek, never your pupils. Let the compass do the looking, and Faze said his audience loves practical tips, and I almost told him the forest loves practical people because they predict well. But I saved the cruelty for later. At mile 3, the radios flirted with a signal, just a silver thread through static. Then words braided into the noise with a music that wasn't melody, more like breath pressed into copper. Left. Right. Left. 8. And Hina's knuckles went pale around her strap. And I took each unit and popped the batteries, because the radio man knows 2 doors, wire and wind, and we had already left him one. When the wind door opened, there was the second test. A ranger shape and a green jacket in the notch ahead. Height right, gait right, cap right, and even my own name file card clean on his mouth. And he smiled a helpful government smile and said the tower's staffed tonight. Come warm yourself. And I asked his rotation and got the number that would have been mine last week. Then asked for the badge and he gave it, then asked nothing. Only watched the space between his answers like a drum. And when that space held 3 perfect human beats, and the 4th stretched into consideration, we walked by without nodding, because courtesy is a doorway here. We camped in the designated ring where salt threads knit the soil and iron. Teeth the size of poppy seeds gritted under the top litter. And Bilal said the ground sounds like a mill when you move, and I said mills keep wolves out of wheat, and he asked if we were the wheat, and I didn't answer. Night lifts differently in Ash Pines, an inch at a time off the floor. So your ankles go cold before your face does, and sometime around moonrise the breather learned our timing. Matching our sips with a hush that felt like knuckles dragging along the inside of a tent, and Rafi, who likes to win, decided to stop longer than it did, to make it wait. And the wait answered by arriving nearer, so the tent skin bowed in without wind. And I told a story about altitude and CO like a bedtime lie, and made us all walk a lazy figure 8 through the ring as if we were prayer wheels that needed turning. And Hina mouthed counting 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and 8 the next number, because that is the one that opens the throat of this place. We moved before dawn to take the ridge in gray, and the ridge answered by lifting a pale grid of lights between trees. Moths stitching geometry like a patient teacher. Squares, circles, a figure 8 traced careful as chalk. And Fays, whose feet are second to curiosity, pivoted offline for a shot and froze with the slack smile of a man who thinks his mother just called his name. Except the voice came from his left molars, not the air. And I snapped the salt vial over the line so it fountained quietly. Then dragged him back by the harness while he cried without sound, tears shiny and useless as new coins. By noon we made the fire road where documents insist a tower stands and maps confess it doesn't anymore. And yet the tower was there, all creek and bureaucratic wood. And inside it a pantry of other people's rules. Notebooks with columns labeled count, delay, hum. And a box of tapes that labeled themselves, dates from when tape still felt like the future. And for maybe 5 breaths we were archivists, not prey. Until the radio in the corner woke up without a battery and sang a marching song in the voice of my first field mentor, who has been dead a polite number of years. And Hina, who knows the sound of shock, guided us back outside with a medic's Sunday voice while Zara took a picture that came out of the camera already 80 years old. When the breather goes silent, you are out of courtesy time. And silence fell like velvet over a spill, so we moved faster. Not running, because running draws outlines and outlines are invitations to things that collect outlines. But fast enough to make our hearts a little loud. And that's when the forest put on a familiar's face. The mirror Warden came back with the right boot scuff. My bad shoulder tilt, even a new scratch on the left hand I had acquired that morning, tearing a burr off the line. And he didn't speak this time, only shrugged. A gesture I know I use when I'm pretending a choice is easy. And I said to the others that you don't kill mirrors, you starve them. And we circled wide and watched him blur at the edges like a man sweating in someone else's skin. There are children in ash pines the way there are children in dreams, constructed, urgent, imprecise, and near the old tailings where the dirt is too bright for soil, a little voice asked if we had seen her mother, and Zara stepped before she knew she had a body. And I grabbed the back of her jacket and the child lifted its face, and the eyes were, not eyes but the idea of eyes in polished stone. And Hina, who had not screamed all night, spoke softly in a language the child might once have known, and the child shook its head, like a dog flinging off rein, and walked backwards into the trees without turning. And all the moths turned their circles to meet it, and went out like candles. By midnight, we were tired enough to negotiate with the storm, and that's when the forest negotiated with us instead. The radio man came in 3 voices at once, left, right, and above, each singing the same syllable 8, on a pitch that finds the hinge under the tongue. And Rafi answered with silence he could not hold, a syllable escaping like steam, and his knees unlocked as if time had length. And Hina kept him with the old trick where you make the breath count a metronome. You can bribe 3 in, 3 hold, 3 out, skip the last, never the last, and we carry him with our eyes to the next rise. On the far slope, a stringer bridge sat over a black run of water shaped like a thought. The beams slick with moss, but inside the line if you took it straight. And in the water, the reflection of the bridge wore a ranger leaning where there was no ranger on the boards. And I told them reflections are invitations evicted from bodies, and we crossed with our chins down, watching our laces like a prayer you're embarrassed to be caught saying. And halfway across the hum below, built into the kind of chord that makes glass look like a weak idea. And Hina's cheek twitched toward the sound, and I said out loud her childhood, dog's name to give her brain something true to chase. And it worked, and we reached the far side owing pieces of ourselves we could not inventory. Near dawn we met the Curator for the first time. though we'd known his methods all night. In a clearing that looked designed for speeches, ledger under his arm like a district official on inspection. The skin the color that happens when a face has been described too many times by people who didn't see it. And he spoke pleasantly about trades and boundaries and the need for agreements that keep traffic moving. And he offered what they all offer when the math is not in your favor, a name for the road. One of ours to anchor the deal so the rest could pass. And Billow made a small sound that was not fear. Not yet, and I told the curator I would give him what he didn't ask for, fire in the language of salt, and I tore the ledger page I had stolen from the tower and burned it in a circle on the ground, and the moths shuddered, the way a fish does in a net. And the curator tilted his head with professional curiosity and marked something in his book with a nail the shape of a pen. And we left before he could show us whose handwriting he had borrowed for the notes. By full daylight, the forest tried a kinder trap familiar smells. Bread and rain in the hallway of a school, and Raffi laughed. Once like a man remembering a joke and then put the laugh back. Because the laughter wasn't his, and we walked into the easier part of the map where the path pretends to be a decision. And the breather kept parallel in the crowns like a ceiling fan you can't reach. And the radio man sulked in the needles with whispers about weather advisories that will get you wet if you listen. And the mirror warden learned a new trick with shadows that made him more convincing for 3 steps, before the ankle bone told on him. And I taught them the last thing you can teach in a place that learns back, that you do not need to believe a rule for it to save you. You only need to practice it until your body does the obeying for you, until your mouth forgets 8, until you can feel the edge of iron through your solace and count your steps in 7s without fingers. When the gate finally showed itself not as a structure, but as a change in the grammar of light, we did not cheer. Because that is how endings invite second acts. We only kept moving as if there were more trail ahead, which there was. Because leaving is always a trail and never a door. And the sirens were city-colored and ugly in the pretty way safety is. And a ranger in a real uniform with the wrong posture asked the questions people ask when they will not be able to use our answers. And Hina explained dehydration and shock, and I explained nothing. And the curator watched from the crowd with a borrowed face, making a note about how we pronounce our own names when we're tired. And I thought about how the map will always show ash pines as a green quilt with trails printed like veins, and how the only truth a map can't hold is the beat between answers. I went back later alone, because that is the worst and best way to file a report the land can read. And the breather found me because I stopped to listen to what I had learned, which is that I do not have to invent courage much, only rhythm. And I walked my 7s like a tax paid in small coins. And the moths loosened into ordinary white, and the radio in my pocket, batteryless, said my name the way my mother did in a hallway. And I did not answer because we are not family here. We are users of a road with a toll. And I poured a last loop of salt that made the iron in the dirt raise its head like filings toward a magnet. And somewhere the curator closed a book and shelved it by color. And that should worry you more than lights or voices or uniforms do. Because librarians never forget the way you leave. If a sound tonight followed you into the room, breath that learned your timing, radio static that remembered your name, lantern glow that drew circles in your sleep, don't stop. Count to 7, stay on the line, and never answer the reflection. This has been Untold Scary Truths. If you want more nights where maps lie and rules keep you living, subscribe to Untold Scary Truths. Tap the bell so the next shadow doesn't pass you unnoticed. And share this with the one friend who still thinks the wilderness is empty, because it isn't, and neither are we.